Sweet. Okay, I'd like to welcome everybody out to the City of Ojai Historic Preservation Commission. Today is Thursday, June 8th, 2023, and it's just a teeny bit after 5 o'clock. Members of the public wishing to address the Historic Preservation Commission on items appearing on the agenda are requested to complete a speaker's card, if in person, and file it with the secretary. Mara. Cards are available in the lobby. Speakers should state their name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Unless there's no one here, and then we might give you a little longer. Okay, so we will now flip over. Ooh, don't have to read all that. Okay, Alex, could we get a roll call, please?
McHatton?
Yes. Here.
Akins?
Here.
Bisaccia?
Here.
Walker?
Here.
Convery?
Absent.
Thank you.
Okay, if you'll stand with me for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a little side comment. I think somebody's got a vacancy for doing the Pledge of Allegiance, the second meeting in July, since James won't be here. I'm sure you will. Yeah, another reason we'll miss him. Okay. At this time, then, we'd like to turn the time over to Mara, who will be conducting our item of business, selection of Historic Preservation Commission chairperson and vice chairperson.
Thank you, Chair Akins. So staff is requesting that the HPC nominate, elect, and appoint a new chairperson and vice chairperson. We don't have Commissioner Convery here. And, but if you wish to do this evening with the four of you, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
If we're not precluded from, we do not have a majority of non-residents, so I believe we can proceed.
That's true. You can. You may.
So if you'd like to proceed then.
So I'm going to turn it back over to the commissioners to nominate and take a vote for chairperson and vice chair. So a nomination.
I'd like to nominate Brian Akins for chair.
I would like to acknowledge that how Brian is at every meeting, if it has anything to do with HPC, anywhere from the school district to any one of the commissions and everything, and how much I appreciate that in someone who is our chair. So I definitely second that.
Thank you.
I also second it, even though we're not required to second it, right?
Thank you, Rick. And thank you, Craig.
And so then Alex can take a vote on that nomination for Chair Akins to be nominated for, to remain chair.
Bisaccia?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
McHatton?
Yes.
Akins?
Yes. Great, thank you all. So at this time, we will now move on to the vice chair for the Historic Preservation Commission and open it up to the commissioners for a nomination for vice chair. I would like to nominate Gina McHatton as the vice chair again this year. And so that is my motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, roll call, please, Alex.
Akins?
Yes.
Bisaccia?
Yes.
Walker?
Yes.
McHatton?
Yes. Thank you.
I should have
Yeah, I
seen
think-
if there were any other nominations, but
I thought you said Gina, but you said Cindy?
Oh, no, said Jeannie. Sorry, did I say Cindy?
Well, you said Gina, but then you said, like, again, as if she were now, but she's not now.
Well,
Cindy
I
is.
nominated her last year,
Oh,
but then
I
we
see.
deferred to Cindy Convery.
Okay,
And so that's why I mentioned Gina twice, that
okay.
one more time I was making that nomination.
Well, no one interrupted you to get a vice chair in there, a different vice chair in there, so if I'll say yay, then Gina McHatton will be vice chair.
Yes, yes.
Can we get a yes from everyone, please?
Do we do a roll call?
Well, we did do a roll call, except then
Okay.
you acknowledged the fact that there wasn't any discussion or allowance for anyone to make a different nomination, so I just
Okay.
wanted to make sure. I was just backing you up there.
Alex, could we get one more roll call, or one more vote, please?
Akins,
Yes.
Bisaccia,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
McHatton.
Yes.
Sweet. Okay, well, thank you, everybody, and I'm looking
Thank
forward
you.
to this year. Okay, so that's item of business number 1. At this time, public communications. Public communications is the time set aside during the Historic Preservation Commission meeting for members of the public to address the Historic Preservation Commission on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at this time may be briefly discussed by the commission and will generally be referred to staff and/or placed on a subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than for emergency items, no action can be taken at this meeting. Alex, do we have any public comments?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Alex. So then we will move on to the museum representative report. Wendy Barker, Executive Director for the museum, sent this to me today. I think right now she's very busy because I think the early version of the music festival is celebrating tonight, and the later version of the music festival is celebrating tomorrow. So Wendy sent me this. The Ojai Arts Commission had a grants workshop at the museum last week. Very grateful to them for doing that. The museum's annual meeting is Wednesday, June 14th from 7 to 8 p.m. on our back patio. Free admission with Brett Bradigan as our speaker. Third Friday is on Friday, June 16th from 5 to 7 p.m. Free with crafts and music and all kinds of crazy, wonderful things that they do that night. So, and generally has all ages that are involved in that. The last days to view our current exhibition, which is Innovators from the Ojai Valley, is Sunday, June 18th. Tuesday, June 20th at 4 p.m. is the presentation of Living Treasures at the museum by the 2 local Rotary clubs. Open to everybody who'd like to come and support those individuals. It's a great event. A group exhibition of Ojai artists opens on Friday, June 30th with a reception from 5 to 7 p.m. Thank you, Wendy.
Chair,
Yes,
if we could go back to item number 1 on the agenda.
here we go. Yes,
Okay, thank you.
please.
So on the second page of the staff report in your packet for item number 1, there are the Historic Preservation Commission commissioners and all of their dates that they were appointed and their present term and their expiration. And there are some inaccuracies in here, and I'd like to just verbally correct it for the record. So Cynthia Convery, her information is correct. Rick Bisaccia is incorrect, however, and the expiration is actually 2026 and not 2027. And I believe he started on May 19th, 2024, and he was taking over for Valerie James. So it would be the rest of her term that he came in on. Brian Akins, that information is correct. Craig Walker is replacing Jenny Prebor, and the term expires or started June 28th, 2022, and then Craig came on recently, and his term expires on May 24th, 2026. And Gina McHatton, that information is correct. So there are a couple of dates here that are not correct, and it'll be cleaned up just in the system. And I just wanted to verbally say it for the 4 of you, 5 of you if Commissioner Convery was here. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Does that sound correct to you, Gina?
Yes. You did just, you verbally says that Rick started in 2024, but I know that you meant 2023.
Did I say that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
but that-
no, thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of dates right here. Right, no, Rick obviously started, right, he started 2023. And ends,
Can you speak into the mic, please?
Rick ends May 24th, 2026. Okay.
Great, thank you. And that'll be corrected then also on the terms that are within the city website.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Okay. Let's see, museum rep, we did that. Okay, consent items on the minutes. Mar, did you have a staff item on that
I'd
that
like,
you wanted to bring up?
if I could bring something up on that as well. Number 4, I would like to correct item number 4, where it says the commission communicated support for the naming of the jail. I would like to change that language to reflect the meeting a little more accurately and say that the commission discussed the aspects of naming the jail after Constable Hunt versus creating a plaque to honor him at the jail site, period. What we create here for the minutes, they're action minutes, and so the details, all of the details of what is spoken are not included in the minutes, but just very briefly, the general gist of what was happening, and then, of course, the motion and the second and the vote. So if you wish to add something else, we can do that at this time, and then the minutes will return to you at the next meeting for you to approve or to review and consider and approve. If you're okay, just a second, sorry. If you're okay with the minutes as I just corrected, then we can just end it there. But it sounds like there's,
Well, at that paragraph that you just said, the commission communicated support for the naming, and you want to change that? The second part of that sentence where it says discuss the potential positive impact, can you put positive and negative impacts? Because we did discuss both.
okay, so what I'm recommending we say, and tell me if you want to add to this, okay, is the commission discussed the aspects of naming the jail after Constable Hunt versus creating a plaque to honor him at the jail site, period. Would you like me to add a sentence after that?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Does anybody else have an addition or remission?
I have an update, but it took place after the meeting was concluded, so we'll finish this
Okay.
item first.
So just on the minutes.
Craig?
The only question I had was that Commissioner Convery was discussing the possible kind of plaque, whether it would just represent Harry Hunt or whether it would be something for all officers from the Ojai Valley who have died in the line of duty, or whether it be officers who made a difference to Ojai that might include some who didn't die in the line of duty. But I think that was left as an open question. So
If the wish is from the commission for.
Let me address that.
Okay,
So that discussion came up when we were talking about the naming of the jail, rather than specifically about the plaque. The plaque was, what the motion passed, was to honor Constable Harry Hunt Sr. What you're talking about is when we were talking about naming the jail, in recognizing other entities and making that kind of a wall of remembrance, encompassing the things that you just highlighted. But the motion passed was the approval of doing a plaque and going forward. And then I have an update, but after we finish voting on this.
Did you have something else, Commissioner McHatton?
I have another question about the minutes, though.
Okay.
Is it okay to move on to
Uh-huh.
something else? Because at the end.
Mr. Walker, please speak into the mic.
Oh, sorry. At the end, where it was informational items on topics that we would discuss with the council during our joint meeting, that does say further discussion about naming the Ojai City Jail after Constable Harry Hunt, but we're not going to bring that. I mean, that's not something we're proposing to the council, so that wouldn't be correct.
Actually, before creating a plaque and installing it, you do need the blessing of the council. And so it is on the list for the joint meeting.
To discuss renaming the,
Says renaming the jail.
Oh, thank you. You're right, it's not about naming the jail, it's just about a plaque.
about a plaque.
So,
I'll tell
yes,
you what,
so this
if-
language needs to be altered.
Yeah, well, we were going to discuss the naming of the jail, but I made a motion, and then I withdrew that.
Right,
motion.
so I'm just saying that this item should be changed too, because that's not on our list that we decided.
Well, that was still an open item, and once we pass the amended minutes, then I will give an update on that, which will actually just a sneak peek, make this conversation cease.
No, I know, I'm just talking about for the sake of the minutes. That should not read that way. At the end of the meeting, we didn't decide to take the renaming of the jail to the council.
No, to the council, no.
That's
So,
correct, so this line in the minutes needs to be revised.
right,
Further discussion about the plaque, having a
yes,
plaque
just,
created to honor Constable Hunt is for discussion at the council.
right.
So I'm going to rewrite that language, and we'll bring this back to you at the next meeting.
Okay, and then the other issue was that the question of what we are going to propose for the council about the Matilaha Junior High School, because there's nothing on this list about us talking about Matilaha Junior High School with the council, and yet that was conveyed to the school board that would be coming up before the council.
So that is an item that's on the joint meeting with the council. At that time, we didn't have a set date.
But
It says that
it's not on this list that's supposedly the list of what we're proposing to talk to the council.
This list here on page 4
Yes.
of the agenda, or the minutes, I'm sorry,
Yes,
that we're looking at the minutes right now. The last item is the school invitations for the tour of the school, of the jail. Is that what you're talking about, the letter?
no, there was a letter that Lucas sent to the school board that said that the HPC would be discussing further action on Matilaha Junior High School with the council, but it's not on our list here.
Okay, so I think actually the chair do you want to address that? I think you're talking about something that you read in the newspaper?
No, it was something, it was a letter that Lucas sent to the school board, and in that letter, he said that the council would be talking about, with the HPC, would be talking about Matilaha Junior High School and its status with the city, but it's not on our list of topics to
Okay.
discuss with them.
So my understanding is that Lucas sent an email to the Ojai Unified School District.
Yes,
Not a letter, but an email, and he let them know that if anything is going on about Matilaha School, junior high school, that they would be informed in advance of any kind of, the topic coming up at any kind of a meeting.
but that's
and-
not what it said, because it was in their agenda, the school board's agenda, so you could read it, and it,
Okay, well,
So your question, Craig, is whether, so we did talk in that meeting about the history of the Matilaha Middle School.
right.
And we thank you for the 4-page document that you provided to us with the history. So the question was, the question here, Mara, is are these informational items that are listed on the page 4, are they supposed to be inclusive of all things that we were discussing, taking forward to the city council joint meeting?
At our May meeting, this was the list of things that we talked about going forth for a joint meeting. This
Okay.
is the list.
Okay,
And the list includes, this list does not include, but should include, and that's why we're looking at it tonight before we sign off on
Right.
the school, Matilah Junior High School.
Yeah.
So that
So-
should be on this list.
But this list isn't the final list, because if we
No,
have
it's
a-
not. This
a
is just
one-
from the
No,
minutes
this
of our
is-
last meeting.
Okay, a 1-hour joint session, this would take hours, so, yeah.
Right.
Okay,
These minutes aren't going to the council. These are just our minutes from our last meeting.
yes.
okay.
So, go ahead.
So going with the suggestion that you just made, I think actually reflects what Craig is talking about, the fact that we should have a line in there that talks about Matilah Middle School. And I say that looking more to what happened subsequent to this meeting and is current as of right now than what we discussed then. So yes, it makes sense that Matilah Middle School would have been on this list.
Well, based on what Lucas wrote to them, it would appear that
I
way.
would we're just talking about our minutes,
Right.
okay? So,
We have to, we're only talking about what happened in the May 11th meeting and not what happened at the school board's meeting. So I'm going to go back and watch our meeting from the 11th and make sure that the minutes are
Okay.
accurately reflecting whatever kind of discussion happened and what items we said we're going to go forward to the joint meeting.
And are we going to decide tonight what the final list is? Because we won't meet again before.
no,
I'm going to be reviewing those minutes, or the live video between now and our next meeting, and you're going to get the minutes at our next meeting to review and approve again,
Okay.
because they're not accurate tonight.
correct. Okay, so,
I have one more thing. Under
Yes.
commissioner comments, it seems like that item was item 3, where Brian started out by talking about renaming the jail, right? Is that?
These are
No,
just
that's not
all
item
over the
3.
place.
Item 4, where it's like, discuss the prospect of naming the Ojai City Jail after Constable Harry Hunt. We had our conversation, Chair Akins opened the item, we talked about it, but then at the very, very end of the meeting, you have them as commissioner comments, bringing it back up again. And that item was closed.
yeah, I think that item, that information there would have been brought up under item 4.
Thank you. And also,
Right.
that makes sense, Commissioner McHatton. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So we're going to redo the minutes and bring them back to you at your next meeting. Sorry that they'll be a month later and
No problem at
not
all.
as fresh in our minds. So,
Yep, nope, I think that's great. So so minutes will be reviewed, perhaps revised, and brought back to our next meeting for review and approval. Okay,
thank you.
does that work for everybody? Sweet. Okay, let's see where we are. We are on, that's the next one, next we're bringing, so I do have an update to the Matilah Middle School as it involves the Ojai Unified School District and other things that took place, but I'm going to bring those items up in commissioner comments rather than interject them now. So there is lots that's happened since then. Okay. Oops.
I'm just going to hand out something while you're discussing or while you're opening up the next item.
Oh, okay. So next item is item number 3. So is this our staff report?
This is actually
Yeah,
an
that's not the
email,
staff report, just,
this is an email to, tomorrow from me, where I was just a little late getting it,
Oh,
blank
this
copied
is,
to
this is
everybody.
for,
This is the letter to educators to schools about our jail.
oh, okay, that's this item right now.
So
Item
item
number
number 3, right, is a request by Chair Akins and Commissioner, now Vice Chair McHatton, to discuss the prospect of preparing a local letter, or a letter to local schools regarding visits to the Ojai jail. And what you have before you, and I'm gonna put on the dais right now,
Okay.
out in the hallway, is a draft letter that Vice Chair McHatton prepared for your review and to see if, for your review and comment.
Okay, and,
I'm gonna put it out there.
So
What?
I'm gonna read it.
okay,
Is that okay?
yeah, let's just wait until our visitors. We like visitors, especially the mayor who shows up and sits through we're not going to go that late today. We hope.
Okay, can I read it?
Me too. Okay, yes, please.
Okay. Hello, Ojai educators. We would like you to know that the City of Ojai and the Historic Preservation Commission could welcome your students to Ojai's historic landmark, the Ojai Jail, as a local field trip. This could be for young ones to learn about their neighborhood and the history of their town. It could be open for older students as part of local history and storytelling. Right now, the jail is open once a year during Ojai Day, and each year, Ojai youths are fascinated by the historic jail. They ask good questions and get a little bit of history, maybe even get a little spooked when they get to take turns getting locked up. If you know of a class who would benefit from a visit to this historical site and would like to set something up for the 23-24 school year, please reach out to Commissioner Gina McHatton for more information at gina@mchatton.com. Thank you. I included my personal because I was trying to not do any staff time, but I don't know if that's okay.
It's okay with me. My name's all over the city last year from doing the downtown historic district, so.
My understanding is, staff's understanding is that it would be something that's coming from and completely through the commission and not taking staff time, so that, to my knowledge, would be appropriate.
Sounds great to me.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay.
Does anybody have any changes on the wording or anything like that? I think with the situation with how expensive field trips can be, this could be a nice little thing for classrooms to do that can be no cost to the school and, no cost to anybody and very educational. So I think that would be benefit to the community.
And will Brian be there dressed up like an inmate?
Well, Brian, you, me, Rick, one of them.
You bet. Yeah, no, that sounds great. There actually are tours that are being given by our county ghost hunter through the Parks and Rec Commission, and I think they sell out each time they do them. I think they do them maybe about 3 times a year. So maybe we can get some spooky music from our last Ojai Arts Initiative, Ojai Jail Arts Initiative. That was creepy. Okay, thank you. Do you think that meets what we've put in this item? Is there any further discussion on this?
Sounds great.
Gina, do you think that meets what we were trying to do?
I think so, yes.
Okay, great. Do we need a motion to proceed? Or just our agreement?
You need an agreement between the 4 of you, if
think-
everyone is supportive of it.
Yep.
I think we're agreed. Great. Thank you, Gina. Thank you for generating this and presenting it today. Okay, item number 4, proposed local downtown historic district ad hoc committee's progress report. Do you have any staff report?
The staff report includes a brief update from the last meeting, at which time Vice Chair McHatton reported that she and Commissioner Walker will remain as ad hoc committee members.
Correct, thank you. Alex, do we have anyone online who wants to speak?
No.
Okay. So then I'll turn the time over to Vice Chair McHatton.
I I want to turn it over to Craig Walker, Commissioner Walker, who's going to talk about things that he's discovered with overlays in the district.
Right. Well, thank you. This project has a lot of different elements to it. It's a large project, and the commission has been trying to educate itself and also design this historic district based on our own learning and what we know about the history of the downtown and also about historic preservation. And a few weeks ago, I began looking at the design guidelines that we might want to develop for the downtown historic district. And so I decided to begin by looking at the design guidelines that already exist for the downtown area. And I noticed there were 4 or 5 existing design guidelines for the properties in downtown Ojai, and they were all enacted over the years, over several years, the last 30 years, to protect the historic character of the downtown. So the various councils that have served have recognized that downtown is historic, and they wanted to put something into place that would help to protect those buildings and would help to make sure that the downtown evolved or was developed in a way that was compatible with the historic buildings. So some of these, there are 5 different guidelines that now apply to the downtown historic area. There's the Ojai Redevelopment Area Statement of Theme. And this area covers pretty close to the area that we've been talking about for the downtown historic district. But it's very specific. It really focuses on the Mission Revival buildings, and it advocates for any new development or remodels to follow that Mission Revival theme in the downtown, and has a lot of specific requirements as far as paint colors and awnings and various other treatments to the property. It doesn't have anything that outlines which buildings are actually historic and which aren't, but it simply says if you're going to construct a new building or you're going to remodel your building, it should have a Spanish theme, basically. So I thought that was interesting that it kind of ignored the whole historic part of it. Another one of the really well-developed downtown design guidelines is the Ojai Arcade Plaza Architectural Design Guidelines. And it covers not only the back of the arcade, but also the front of the arcade, and even defines as its boundaries the areas surrounding that block that includes the back of the arcade from Montgomery Street to Signal Street and Matilaha and Ojai Avenue. So if you're on the south side of Ojai Avenue across from the arcade, you would be included in these guidelines. Or if you were on the north side of Matilaha Street facing the back of the arcade, you would be included in these guidelines. And they're very detailed, very specific. They really outline exactly what you can and can't do to keep your buildings Spanish and to keep them compatible with what the people at that time saw as protecting the historic area downtown. But they've got a checklist with like 30 different things that you have to keep in mind if you're going to submit a plan to the city. And so it's quite detailed, quite complicated. But again, just like the theme guidelines for the redevelopment, it doesn't have any catalog of the actual buildings and which are historic and which aren't, and any sort of treatment for the historic buildings, like even suggesting that maybe those be adaptive reuse, encouraging the owners to keep their historic buildings and to adapt them to new uses rather than tearing them down. And I found it interesting because literally under some of these guidelines, someone could tear down their historic building and build a new one, and as long as it was Spanish themed, it would be okay. So I think what we're trying to do is come up with a new set of guidelines that will recognize the buildings that are historic, that the state has declared are historic, and that we have determined are historic, and make the guidelines more specific to the building itself and not so much to just whether it's Spanish or whether it has an arch or something like that. And then there's the arcade design guidelines. And these were kind of interesting because they really did look at the historic nature of the buildings in the arcade. These only apply to the arcade itself and the storefronts behind the arcade. And so those are the things that it is concerned with. A lot of these are handled by the Planning Commission, some of them with the Planning Commission with input from the HPC. But this was the design guidelines that are totally reviewed by the Historic Preservation Commission. So if someone comes in with a project that affects obviously signage out front of their arcade store, but even if they wanted to change the color or put an addition onto the storefront, they would get their permit through the HPC rather than the Planning Commission. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then there's the Libby Park. It's a master plan, a Libby Park master plan that was done back in 1993, and I believe this was the master plan, the famous one that led to the jail becoming a landmark, because when this company first came up with a master plan, they had torn down and eliminated the jail. They thought it was, we'll get that out of there and put a swimming pool down in that area or something. They had some other intent, and Betty McAllister, who was with the Historic Preservation Commission, started a citywide campaign to save the jail. And what really convinced the council was there was a couple of important people in Ojai that came and talked about having been arrested and spent the night in the jail, and how important it was to keep that as a historic. But anyway, these guidelines talk about the history of the park and making sure the park is kept according to its historic nature. And finally, we have the Secretary of the Interior standards, because many of the buildings in the downtown, I think 12 buildings in the general area we're talking about are city landmarks, and city landmarks are governed by the Secretary of the Interior standards. So there are those guidelines. And now that the state of California has named the downtown one of its historic districts, the Secretary of the Interior standards will apply from a CEQA point of view to those buildings that are contributing properties to that historic district, not Ojai, but the state designation, that they will follow the Secretary of the Interior standards in order to get CEQA exemptions, so forth. So when we first started this project, we said that we wanted to make sure that the property owners wouldn't have any additional requirements, as little as possible, that they would have to contend with. And I think the view that some people have is that if we added a historic district, it would mean adding another group of design guidelines to this stack. But it doesn't mean that. It means that for the historic district, we can redesign those guidelines in such a way that we can eliminate a lot of the ones that don't apply, make it simpler, more direct, with fewer reviews, and make it easier actually on the property owners. I don't know that they all completely understand that right now, but I think that our goal is to create design guidelines that will actually make life easier for them and be something that, and also another fact that is interesting is that none of these design guidelines come with any incentives. They don't come with any incentives at all. These are what you have to follow. But through a historic district, the guidelines that the property owners and the businesses follow, they come with potential benefits, such as using the state historic building code, which can make their life a lot easier when rehabilitating their building. It is possible for the city council to change their code a little bit so that the Mills Act not only applies to landmarks, but also applies to buildings that contribute to a historic district, or even buildings that are on our structures of merit list. Those are all eligible under the state law. Any building that's been designated by the city as historic is eligible for Mills Act, but the local government, through their code, determines which ones. So they could easily change that if they're so inclined. There's also a lot of things that various cities do to encourage and to support the property owners in a local historic district with zoning waivers and density bonuses and a lot of different things, but that would be really a different conversation for the city. So anyway, it was quite an interesting little journey into almost a history of how the city has dealt with these downtown properties, but these things still are in effect and they still are how things are determined. And I thought of the Ojai Theater and how when it was damaged, how Southern California Water just wanted to pay to demolish it and replace it with a box theater that would have some Spanish designs on it, which would have been allowed in the city design guidelines at that time. And fortunately, Khaled Alawar, the owner, took them to court and proved to the court that the building was historic and needed to be preserved and not demolished. And so the court agreed with him and gave him a settlement that allowed it to really be fully compensated. So anyway, that's just a little brief report on what I've been looking into.
Thank you, Craig.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just bring up a couple things. So again, thank you, Craig, very, very much. We, in the discussions in the ad hoc group last year in September, when I went before the city council, I told them there were 3 goals that we were trying to accomplish with the downtown historic district. I talked to every person I talked to over the 9 months last year, and it was a lot of people. I told them our 3 goals was to create a local historic district, local rather than state, because as Craig just said, there's the benefits that come with the locality of that, also with the ability to amend the code. The number 2 thing was to make the Mills Act available to folks without getting the code changed, without having to do a historic, costly and time-delaying historic resources report. And number 3 was to change these overlays, which again, I thought I heard you say that all of those overlays are still in effect. Is that correct?
Yes, they're all posted on the city's website as I got them just off the city's website because they're still what govern how things are evaluated, and that's my understanding. I mean,
I agree with you. It was a loaded question because I'm going to clip what you just said to us so well, and when I'm out contacting people, I will relay that to them because you have a fine reputation in this community, and we appreciate you sharing that with us and sharing with them.
Yes,
It's
also.
important stuff. The number 3 thing we were going to do was what Craig's doing himself. And when I went to the council at that time, the 3rd thing I asked was permission for us to work together in an ad hoc committee formed between the Historic Preservation Commission and the Planning Commission. We it kind of just dropped those three things. At that time, we continued doing what we could. Part of it is that using Craig's talents like we did in the ad hoc committee that we had with Craig, Gina, and myself is free. No staff time. Free. So that's a big thing. Important to me, important to the city. So, Craig, thank you very much for this report. Of course.
Add one thing. I do think it's important that, well, first of all, I think that the foundation of the design guidelines should come from the Secretary of the Interior standards. They're very direct. They've been proven. And I mean, there's like thousands of historic districts all across America that have been successfully working to help energize towns and to protect their buildings. And they all use the Secretary of the Interior standards. They're very general. They're not specific like a lot of the ones you find on the level from the city, but they're very all-encompassing. You know, you really get how we can protect this building, but also give the property owner the flexibility that they need to be able to run their business and be successful in that too. But I do think that once we kind of come up with a preliminary set of guidelines, we should have meetings where we invite the Planning Commission and the downtown merchants and business people and members of the community to get their input and find out what kind of things, what are their thoughts about it.
Yes, I agree completely. Yes.
I would like to add that just hearing it all out loud, and it's very obvious why there was pushback. Who would want anything onto that list of things? And I think that if we do what we promised and we work to simplify it and we work to have incentives, I think that and then the next part is the education. I think that property owners will be very pleased because that's trying to get anything done. I can't imagine with that list. I mean that's a lot. So I think they'll be happy once we get it done.
I think we'll be happy when it's done.
Yeah.
Yes, successfully. Okay, any other questions on this? Nope. Again, Craig, thank you very much. 5 overlays. I have copies of those at home. I use them to hold the door open in my office. Okay, thank you. Then we will move on to Alex, did we have any comments on that?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now move on to item number 5. For those that have seen this section in the packet, I think when I first saw these, Craig, that they were more in a black and white and sepia color. I don't remember them being the vivid color copies that we see now that we were talking about earlier. I know maybe you can talk about presentations that you've done in the past too along this line and just give us a little bit of backstory on where we are right now. I will tell you that just as a brief thing, I did visit with the Ojai Unified School District last night. I went there to introduce myself to the board. I knew the old board, but the old board is gone. I know several people that are there, and I told them that, yes, we would be talking about these items, the historic structures of merit, and yes, the Matilah Middle School is one of those items on that list, and that it was not put on last week. It was put on 12 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. So maybe if you can give us some background on the initial creation of this and then bring us to where we are today.
Okay. Well, I just happened to have been on the commission at the time that this was first developed. This was back in 2011, I believe. The city had commissioned a survey by the San Buenaventura Research Associates to do what's called a windshield survey, where they go around and they look at every single property and they give every property a rating in terms of the significance of the building historically and the integrity of the building, whether that building still has enough of its character to still represent that era or what the historic value of the house is or the property. And so we posted that on the Ojai Museum's website so anybody can go and see it. It's called a windshield survey of Ojai historic of Ojai buildings, and it has every single address and what they have. So anyway, when that was presented to the council, and I was brand new, there was a suggestion that from the consultant that the city use that to determine which places to be historic and which not. And I think the council was a little taken aback by that at the time. And there were so many of them that were listed as historic that they were a little overwhelmed. So I remember Paul Blatz, who was on the council, saying, "Why don't you just tell us what the 30 or so most historic buildings are so that we just know what those are, and then we can work from that rather than surveying every single building in Ojai." So we decided to do that, and we formed a committee, and it had David Mason and Terry Hill and many of the kind of old guard of the Historic Preservation Commission, and Rob Mullane was the one in your position, Maura. He was the city liaison. And we met at the museum, and we went through, and we came up with this list of 36 or 37 of what we considered at that time to be the most historic buildings, and we put them into a slideshow, which formed the nucleus of this. But we also made a chart, which you've got a copy of. And we vetted all of them. We had a public hearing just for the HPC, where we had some of the property owners come and ask questions, and some were just proud that their house was on the list. And then when we took it to the council, we also had at that joint meeting, we had the slideshow and talked about it, and we had opened it to the property owners to come. So the list was well vetted, and everybody who was on the list had a chance to come and express their viewpoint on it. I never even thought at that time that it needed to be approved by the council. I mean, I just thought it was for our purposes and the city purposes. But apparently, as time went along, it became clear that it needed to be officially approved by the council, and it never was. I left the HPC, and I never really knew why. I don't think it was ever turned down by them. I just don't ever think it was brought up at a meeting where it was passed, unless I'm wrong, unless anybody else knows. I never heard that it was either approved or not approved. It just, I don't think it ever went to them. So one of the things that happens when you don't have a approved list or register, it's called for in CEQA and called for in the public resources, I don't know, in their laws. And it's in our local code to have this list of structures of merit, and that if it's not on that list, then it's not historic. It's almost like, well, is it historic or isn't it? Well, if it's not on your register, then it's not historic. So if someone comes from one of those properties with a proposal, it's never evaluated in terms of whether it needs to be evaluated historically or not. It's because it's not on this list. So this list, as it's discussed in the city code, only just says that if before it can be demolished or it can be altered, it needs to be reviewed. and see, is it historic? Does it need to be? So I think it would be a benefit there, because I think a lot of buildings are just not even being thought of. The exemptions are being granted, but there's been no review of it in terms of whether it's historic. And there's been some buildings that I've even written a letter to the planning commission and saying, you know, I think you should look at this building a little more, because it might be historic, but if it's not on that list, it's just like it's not historic. So I think it's, at a minimum, it's important to have that list just for managing your historic resources, but also it's a way of honoring the building too. And our code gives the owner the right to negotiate with the city to maybe put a plaque on their property because it's being recognized as historic. So without having to go the full route of being a landmark, you know, right now the only buildings that are historic in Ojai are the landmarks, but that's quite a big project to landmark a building, and sometimes you just want to know it's historic, but without having to go through the whole expense and routine of landmarking. So I think that's why we're here. It would be nice to take this before the council and get them to approve the list. And it's something that CEQA calls for cities to upgrade every 5 years, you know, to upgrade the list, go back and review it. And now that we do have other properties that were mentioned by the state as being contributing, those buildings are actually on the state register of historic places. So I think in the future there should be an effort to try to bring those onto our register, our city if they're on the state register of historic places and eligible for the national register, it seems like it should be on the Ojai register of historic places too.
And also, these buildings could be using incentives that they're not, that they aren't currently utilizing because it's not official. Like they could use the California Historic Building Code. They could be incentivized in many different ways, like you know, like we talked about before with the district.
Yes, all those benefits and incentives could also apply to these, because they would be properties that were designated by the city as historic. They don't have to be landmarks, although in the city code it only says landmarks, but the city could decide to include structures of merit and also contributing properties to the historic district.
So I looked at the list, and I looked at a older list I had. It was attached to an email that gave some history on that, dated August 13th, 2015. There were 37 properties on that list. I then compared it to this newer list, which I guess was 2019 is when the newest list was from. Maura?
Oh, I'm sorry.
2019. And on the old list, there were 37 properties. On the new list, there's 36 properties. They aren't identical because of those original 37 properties. And when I was looking at some of the minutes in meeting agendas, Darwin was told, as the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, when these were presented to the city council, was just pick two, okay? Just pick two that you want to landmark. And the two that we determined to be landmarked are the Smith-Hobson House and the Nordhoff Grammar School. Now, other than those two, the five other three that have been landmarked since that 2015 time is the Isis Theater, or the Ojai Playhouse, which is looking nicer and nicer each day. The Villa Improvement, is it Maravilla or? Maravilla Improvement Company, which is the twice sold bookstore that's next to the library. And the other item that was landmarked since then was the Fairburn Estate, which is, fortunately, some of us got to tour it when we were landmarking it, which is a fabulous estate, but behind one of those iron gates. And then,
I just wanted to add that at that time that we had this list to begin with, even though it wasn't approved by the council did approve enough funding every year for us to do not to landmark, but just to do a historic report on 2 of those buildings every year so that we would have that record of the historic value. We would know whether it was eligible for the state register and the national register or whether it was no longer considered. So we started that process, and then I don't know if it was the economy or what, but somehow those funds got diverted elsewhere, and so we didn't continue that.
Thank you. So I just mentioned the 5 of that original 37 list that went off because they were landmarked. I looked at what were additions. Additions on the newer report are the Hunt Auto Livery. That's where Treasures of Ojai is. The People's Lumber Company, that's where now Help of Ojai is located. The Andrus Ford Dealership, which is where Julia Rose is located. And the Friends Shell Station, which is where Ojai Rote is located. So those are 4 additions that came on in 2019 from the 2015, from the 5 that fell off, and that took us down to the current number on the new list we have is 36. And the information that's on there and the slides that you've put together for all of this, Craig, is just very informative. And if anybody wants to take a tour, I know there were some questions earlier before the meeting. If you get that spreadsheet, it actually gives you the addresses of those locations and some insight on each of the historic structures of merit. I do want to go to the City of Ojai Code section, section 4-08.04, which is definitions. It says structure of merit means an individual structure designated by the council upon recommendation by the Historic Preservation Commission of historic, architectural, community, or aesthetic merit, which has not been designated as a landmark or point of historical interest, but is deserving of being added to a council-approved special recognition list. Again, 4-08.04. So I do like pointing out that we are trying to do all we can and try very hard to adhere to the code and under their guidelines and under the council's guidelines in what we do going forward.
Well, you all have copies of this in your packet, but for the benefit of the people at home, do you want to actually run through?
Yes. So we have a beautiful presentation,
Yes.
and I will turn that on, and then
Sweet.
and then Commissioner Walker can lead it.
Okay, should I just say next slide when it's,
That would be great.
okay.
Let's see. Just a second. Oh, I'm supposed to do something now. There you go.
Okay, so this is on the Historic Preservation Commission's list of structures of merit, but not on the official city list. And it gives the definition there of a structure of merit that Brian just stated, which is established, this list is established in the Ojai Municipal Code. It's also based on the city's general plan, which says that there will be a register of not only historic, but potentially historic buildings, and this falls into that category. But also it's in the Public Resources Code that cities should maintain such a register. and it was approved by the HPC in 2012 and revised in 2019. And I think as we go through this, you'll agree that the loss of any one of these structures would be a loss to the community, and so their preservation, enhancement, and adaptive reuse should be encouraged by the city through education, incentives, and a planning process that prioritizes Ojai's history and unique character. Okay, slide. This is the Ojai Pergola, which, believe it or not, is not a landmark. And the reason for that is it was built originally in 1917. In 1981, it was demolished by the city of Ojai. And a citizens group rose up, led by David Mason, and I was on the committee that he formed in 1999 to restore the building. They found the original plans down in San Diego, and so the building was identical, except that they didn't add the wall, which has a whole story. The story of the wall is a part of Ojai history that the lack of it kind of helps to tell that story in the rebuilt pergola. And it was so well built as a restoration that when the Caltrans investigators came down and studied Ojai, they said that this still deserved to be a contributing building because it was restored according to the Secretary of the Interior standards. So that was very pleasing. Next slide. This is the Boyd Club, which was built in 1903, and it was originally for men, the men of the community. The Women's Center is still down the street where the women met and did the business of their end of things. The men's group met here, and women were allowed in, but only the first Saturday after the full moon or something. I don't know. It was some kind of weird thing that it was tied to the lunar month. We won't go into that. But anyway, you can see that it was a beautiful building. It was designed by Samuel Ilsley, who also designed the fountain that was on the pergola, and he designed the first Foothills Hotel up on the upper edge of the Valley Mountains, and he designed part of the San Isidro Inn over in Santa Barbara. So those are some of the things that he did. You can see that it was moved in 1957. I can still remember being a kid and going down to the street and watching them move it slowly down the street to Sarasota Park. And if you look at the two pictures, you see that they did a pretty good job of rebuilding it there on the site. They simply filled in the porch area, and that's now an office of the building. But it looks pretty good, and we hope that the city will continue with that. It is one of the oldest continuously operating recreation centers in California. It was for the men of the community until World War II. In World War II, it was turned into the USO because we had a military base at the Ojai Valley Inn, and the local volunteers would run a USO there. And then after World War II was over, it was left empty, and the community wanted to do something for the teens of the community, so it became a teen center. It was called Teen Town. That was between 1945 and about 1955. It was a model program that people came from all over to study, Ojai's teenage program. But the city didn't continue funding it, but later on it got converted over and made into the Boyd Club, and that was the impetus for the recreation department and recreation center. Okay, next slide.
Hey, Craig, can I ask you something? Where was that moved from?
It was located across from the arcade. It was located where the I call it the old Bank of America building that's now Spanish style, but it's I forget what stores are in there. It's right next to the creek on the west side of the creek bed that goes under the arcade. So it was located right there, and then it was moved over to Sarasota Park. And then the Bank of America was actually originally in the parking lot where this now parking lot now, and then it was rebuilt there where the Boyd Club had been, and then its old location was turned into the parking lot. It was kind of a strange land swap that happened at that time. This is the Nordhoff High School, which was the Arbolada campus that was built in 1929. And the original building was a craftsman-style building along Ojai Avenue. And in 1929, this building was built to kind of go along with Mr. Libby's vision of Ojai, and it was facing the Arbolada that was also a development by Libby. And it's just a beautiful Spanish building done by Roy C. Wilson. The theater, the auditorium or theater, was built in 1929, but in the mid-30s it was found to be unsafe and was replaced. It was done with the same design, but it was rebuilt, and it was rebuilt as a Depression-era WPA project. Next slide.
And what do we call that area now?
What's that?
What do we call that area now?
Matilahat Junior High, or
Correct.
middle school, I guess it's now.
At middle school.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was junior high when I went there and taught there, but it was converted to a middle school. This is the Ojai Arts Center, designed by Austin Pierpont, who was a local architect, but he also designed in the LA area. And at that time, when it was built in 1939, Ojai had a lot of different arts groups. There was a theater group, there was a literary group, there was a folk dance group, and they all met in various places. And the community decided, under the leadership of Charles Butler, to create this building that would serve all the arts. And it is the longest continuously operating multidisciplinary community arts center in California. And at first, when shortly after it was built, there was a group called the Chekhov Players. They were the only professional troupe, acting troupe in California, and they settled near Ojai, and they put on productions there. That's the English actress Iris Tree, and Ford Rainey, who is an actor. You may remember his name. He was in Hollywood films back in the 40s and 50s. But they had a really good professional group at the theater, but Charles Butler decided that that violated the principle of it being amateur. And so they booted the Chekhov Players out of the Arts Center, and they went and took over the old Summit School up in Upper Ojai, and they started the High Valley Theater, which was located in Upper Ojai. It later became the Amestoy House, which was unfortunately burned down in the Thomas Fire. Next. This is the Ojai Library. It was on property donated by the Libby Estate, and it was designed by Carlton Winslow, who was one of the real pioneers of Mission Revival architecture. He designed many of the buildings down in Balboa Park in San Diego for the Panama, California Exposition of 1915. And he designed this building. It was supported by the community, and just a wonderful building. It was added on to in 1981, but again, the team that came and evaluated Ojai for Caltrans decided that the new addition to it was so well done and so much, followed the Secretary of the Interior standards that they made it a contributing property as well. This is Gray Gables of Ojai. The building was originally built by a woman named Ale Sanford, who was a theosophist who came to Ojai, and she had a plan to do good with the money she inherited from her dead husband, and she wanted to build a center for working teachers. So she built this place as a club, a resident club and community center for working teachers, and she wanted to make this the first of several across the country. That was her big plan. Unfortunately, she ran out of money. She was a little eccentric, and she wasn't able to make it work. So Dr. Ethel Percy-Andrus, who is president of the National Retired Teachers Association, she found this, and it was just perfect for her needs to show the dignity of retired people, retired teachers, and she made it the first national home for retired teachers in America. And it was also the offices of NRTA, and it became the birthplace of AARP. And AARP was born here and run for several years before it got a little too big for Ojai, and now is in Washington, D.C. Next. When Dr. Andrus was here, she brought medical insurance to older people at that time. When you were retired at age 65, you couldn't get medical insurance. And she searched for a long time to get medical insurance for the retired teachers. She was turned down by 42 insurance companies. Finally, she found one that would, and she established the first insurance policy for retired people. And that was the reason that AARP was born, because other people besides retired teachers wanted insurance. And so she established this sister organization. Well, as AARP, they founded this nursing home, which was one of the first nursing homes that wasn't just palliative care. Nursing homes back in the 40s and 50s were where you went to die, basically. They weren't really intended to make you better and get you back out in the world, because people didn't really think that was something that could happen. But she created one of the first medically oriented nursing homes that was based on the field of gerontology. And it's in the back, she set up several apartments that were kind of halfway, where people who didn't need the skilled nursing care and weren't really ready to go back into Gray Gables, that was independent living, they could live in assisted living. And this is given credit for being one of the first assisted living facilities in America. Okay. This is the Presbyterian Church. It was built in 1930. It's also by Carlton Winslow, this famous mission revival architect. And he was the one who made the decision to have the exposition in San Diego be mission revival. And he worked with another architect named Bertram Goodhue that was also a famous architect at the time. And that tower is very much influenced by Goodhue and his Spanish-style architecture. This is the Crotona Institute of Theosophy. It was founded in 1924. It moved up from Hollywood, and they settled in Ojai partially because Krishnamurti had discovered Ojai, and he came to Ojai in 22, so the Theosophists moved their colony up to Ojai. Now, Robert Stacy Judd was well known for his Mayan and Aztec-inspired architecture. If you look at old buildings in LA, you might see some pictures of kind of Mayan design buildings. Frank Lloyd Wright experimented with that style a while, but Robert Stacy Judd was really big on it. But he didn't use that style when he came to Ojai, because in honor of Mr. Libby using a more Mediterranean and Spanish style, he designed the buildings more in keeping with the downtown architecture. This is the old liberal Catholic Church. The Theosophists, when Crotona moved here, they began settling in Miners Oaks. So even though there were a few homes and buildings in Miners Oaks, it was really developed by the early Theosophists. And they had a liberal Catholic Church. Liberal Catholic Church was an offshoot of Theosophy. It was set up by Annie Besant and Bishop Ledbetter. They wanted a church where, because Theosophy was more of a spiritual philosophy, they wanted a place where people could get more religious rituals and trappings. So they kind of founded this liberal Catholic Church. And this was designed by John Rouanet. He was an architect from Finland. He was the head of the Theosophical Society in Finland. He came and he lived in LA at the Hollywood Crotona, where he helped design the Pilgrimage Theater, I believe. He was involved with that. But then he came to Ojai and he designed this building in Miners Oaks. It was later moved off to just east of Gridley Road, where the new liberal Catholic church was built. But he also designed other familiar buildings that you might not realize. The Taj Mahal in Siete Robles was a John Rowanay. Also, the Acacia Manor in Miners Oaks that is on Lomita Street, that big mansion, which is an amazing place if you've never been inside. The lady who had it built just spared no money, no amount of money, and he just gave it all the works. It's really beautiful inside. And he also designed, when the arcade was first built, it didn't have the 4 arches on the east end. And if you look at it, you'll see that the last 4 arches are an addition. You never really think about it, but there's a definite boundary. And he was the one that designed and supervised the building of those easterly arches on the arcade that were done in 1927, 10 years after the arcade was originally built. He also built the western addition onto the El Roblar Hotel. So if you look at that, it was smaller, and there's a wing that goes out on the west side. John Rowanay was commissioned to build that, to design and build that other addition. And he designed several small homes that have a Spanish style. I'm not really sure all of them. There's one across from the Presbyterian Church. But that's why I was concerned when there was some work being done on the houses on Kenyatta Street, because they kind of look like his design and about the same time. Okay, next. This is Frost Hall at Ojai Valley School. Frank Frost was a patron and benefactor of that school that was founded by Edward Yeomans, who, by the way, was a volunteer at Hull House in Chicago at the same time that Ethel Percy Andrus was a volunteer there, so they might have even known each other back in the early 1900s. But Frank Frost hired Wallace Neff to design this building. Wallace Neff also designed the Ojai Valley Country Club, the original building of the country club, and he designed a house out in the East End as well. But he designed many homes for 1920s Hollywood stars down in Beverly Hills and Hollywood. He was quite well known and famous, and he always credited Mr. Libby with kind of giving him his start, because Libby hired him. We always think of Libby as only hiring Mead and Requa, but he also hired other architects like Wallace Neff to do this building, and George Washington Smith did the spec houses in the Arbolada. Next.
Are these 2 different structures?
It's the same one, just from 2 sides. So the top one is, if you were on El Paseo, I believe that's the view you'd get, and this is from the courtyard. And this building is the Fox House. It's located on, it's off of Bryant Circle. Is the way you get to it now, but you used to get to it on Fox Street, because Fox Street was the driveway for Mr. Fox's house, just like Bald Street was the driveway for Mr. Bald's house. And this house is one of the few Second Empire Victorian designs with that mansard roof that looks like something out of Paris. So it's quite special. It's now part of the Weil Tennis Academy. It's their girls' dormitory, or at least it's connected to that. But what's interesting is that Mr. Fox was the son-in-law of Lorenzo Dow Roberts, who was one of the first settlers in the Ojai Valley. And on the property right below this, next to Ojai Avenue, he established the first town. He subdivided off lots, and he had advertisements in the Ventura paper for lots, and he named his town Ojai. But it never took off, and it never went. And then the next year, Roy Surdam came and laid out the town that we have now. And these were right next to each other. I had always envisioned Mr. Roberts town lots as being more out by Gridley Road, but in doing preparation for this, I was able to locate information that it was right on this property, and this became his son-in-law's property. This is interesting. This is the Humane Society building, and this was designed by Eric Lloyd Wright, who is the grandson of Frank Lloyd Wright, and done in very Frank Lloyd Wright-ish style. He studied with his father was Lloyd Wright, who was also a famous architect, and then Frank Lloyd Wright, the grandfather. We all know how famous he was as an architect. This is the Montgomery Baker home, which I believe is empty now. I was having coffee at Java Joe's, and it looked like it was empty. I think it's for sale. But it was the first residence in Ojai, and it was built originally by John Montgomery, who Montgomery Street is named after. He came to Ojai looking to settle here with his Mexican wife and his kids. He was a hero of the Civil War, and he came to Ojai based on the ads that Mr. Surdam had of this wonderful town with pictures of fountains. And he got here, and there was no town. There was just there were just lots, and he bought one, and he built the beginning of this house, which was reportedly made of adobe. But then Mr. Baker, Edwin Baker, brought his family down from Walla Walla. They came in the 1880s, and he bought the property and started fixing it up and making it more Victorian, like you see here. And they had 7 kids. You can see there in the top left, that's Ojai Avenue. And you know how there's a little gap between the arcade and the building next to it? There's that gap that goes back up. Well, that was the driveway, and that gap is the leftover of this driveway that was part of Mr. Montgomery's property that went up to that house. Well, born in that house in 1896 was Helen Baker, who you see in the picture with her parents. She grew up in the house. She was the first, well, she was the valedictorian at Nordoff High School, class of 1915, and she was also one of the tennis champs at the Ojai tennis tournament. But she moved away, went to San Francisco, and became interested in environmental issues. She became the first environmental lobbyist in the state of California, and she started an organization called the Planning League, which was responsible for the Wild and Scenic Rivers, for the Coastal Act, the CEQA was actually one of those that she got passed. She started out on the, dealing with billboards and making sure that billboards. She wrote a wonderful book that the museum is going to publish called Family Album that describes growing up in Ojai and how she comes upon this billboard that says Pears Soap and how she tried to pull it down as a little kid and couldn't. And eventually she grew up and passed legislation that got scenic highways and all those removed. And this is the Presbyterian Manse. It was burned down in the 1917 fire, but was rebuilt by Mead and Requa. So unlike most of their work that was mission revival, this is more craftsman. It's now Osceola, and it was where the Presbyterian minister would live, but it's been a restaurant. It was a private home and a restaurant for many years. This is the El Roblar Hotel that was part of Mr. Libby's plan for Ojai, and it was built in 1919. And as you can see, it's a little smaller, and that other wing was added on to the west side. But this is what it looked like back in the day. This picture was probably taken from the post office tower. And it was designed, by Mead and Requa. This building, now Mead and Requa, when they came to Ojai, this is fine. They brought their own builder named Robert Winfield, and he built all those buildings downtown, the arcade, the post office, the pergola, the El Roblar Hotel. He was the builder. He was a great builder, but he was also a wonderful architect, and he never made any plans. He always bragged that the plans were always in his head, and he always, and he did many buildings. He did the Spanish addition onto this building. So this was originally a craftsman. You can tell it was a craftsman home for the Smith Hobson family, and they commissioned Robert Winfield to do all the Spanish trappings on it, which he did. But he also did the city garage, and he did several other buildings downtown to take what Mr. Libby had done and Mead and Requa and expand it, because it was just meant to be a starting point, and Winfield helped to add a lot of the buildings that give Ojai its distinctive look. This was one of them. This is the Bill Baker's Ojai Bakery. It's famous not only because it was done by Roy Wilson, a famous local architect who designed many buildings in Ojai as well as all around the county, but it was the bakery of Bill Baker, who was known everywhere. He baked cakes for presidents, and he invented a soy bread and a lima bean. A lot of people might not realize this, but during World War I, Ventura County became the lima bean capital of the world because it was a good place to grow them, and land was cheap at that time. Over time, land became more expensive, so the crops changed from lima beans to like strawberries, where you get a better price for a smaller amount of area. But he invented a kind of lima bean bread that was very popular, and soy bread was an invention of his as well. This is Bart's Books, probably one of Ojai's most famous buildings. It's in every article about Ojai, I think. But it was built by Mr. Bartendale, who came up, I believe, from Santa Monica, and in 1964, and he took this original house and added, and became well known for having this honor system. People could take a book off the outside and throw their money under the gate, and that got a lot of attention. So it's been around quite a while. This is the Pac Bell building, another one of the additions. I don't know who the architect was, but you see it what it looked like originally, and then the building or the picture inset of what it looks now. This was the old ice plant. The original ice house was in the building where the theater is, kind of where the lobby is. That was a separate store. It was the ice plant, and there was a meat market next door too. So there was the meat market, the ice plant, and the theater. You'd walk in the theater doors that were right in front of the screen, and you would just buy your ticket there and go in and sit down. The whole lobby thing was when various owners took over the buildings next to it. But anyway, Mr. Hauk moved the ice house to this location on Fox Street, which was the ice plant where they would take the ice around to people's houses for refrigeration. And this is Friends Shell Station. It was designed by Austin Pierpont and done in the Spanish style. It's now the Roti restaurant, but it was a service station for many years. Kind of a Spanish-style service station in the spirit of Ojai. Okay, next.
And you can see the lima and soy.
Yeah, you can
lima-
see the next door is the Lima soya products for Mr. Bill Baker. This is Hunt's Auto Livery. The whole building up front off of the arcade was originally the livery run by Tom Clark. But eventually he sold that to the pharmacy, and it's been a pharmacy for decades. And then this building was built by Robert Winfield behind the pharmacy in the Spanish style, and became the auto livery. It was owned by Hunt. It was Harry Hunt, but not the Harry Hunt that was the constable. It was two different important Harry Hunts in the history of Ojai. And anyway, then it became Mallory and Rowe. They ran it and had a Chevy station there, a Chevy dealership, which eventually moved over into the Fitzgerald building, where, is it Pignon Pizza? That was where they moved after they left this. But you can still see the gas pumps out front. And this is People's Lumber Company. It was a huge county-wide company, started in Ventura, and the lumber would come in on the ships to the pier and would be unloaded and then distributed around to these various satellite businesses in the county. We're not really sure when it opened in Ojai, and we're not sure when that building was built, but it was part of the old People's Lumber Company and is now a part of Help of Ojai, I believe. And the other part of it became Wachters. Yeah. And this is the Andrus Ford dealership. I think Ojai people must have thought they'd arrived when the town got a car dealership. In 1926, that whole building was the car dealership. It had a showroom and a parts department and sales offices. But it's been operated by many different companies over the years. It was a Western Auto for a long time. It was a bowling alley there for a time during the 40s or 50s.
Greg, do we know if that Andrus has any linkage to Ethel Person?
No, this is a spelling too.
That's two S's rather than the one.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Coincidental.
Yeah.
Interesting coincidence.
And this is a really famous modern house in Ojai. It's the James Moore House by Richard Neutra, who is one of the top architects in America from the mid-century era. Nobody's sure what this house looks like now because nobody has ever been in it or talked to anybody that's been in it. So we don't know if it's been completely renovated or what it looks like today. But it was quite groundbreaking, and when you look at books about Richard Neutra or that era, they very often show these pictures. They were taken by Julius Schulman, the famous architectural photographer, and it was part of the Case Study Architects program that Arts and Architecture magazine formed. This is the original Ojai Library. Ojai had one of the first libraries in Ventura County, and it was the George Thatcher Memorial Library. They tried to raise the money through ice cream socials and stuff, and they just couldn't get the money together. So Mr. Thatcher, Sherman Thatcher from the school, donated quite a bit of the money and also a lot of the books for this. It was originally located where the Arts Center is now, but when the Arts Center was built, it was moved to its current location on Lion Street, and it was turned into the Boy Scout House. It served as the Boy Scout House for many years, and then eventually became the Girl Scout House. When I was going to Ojai Elementary School, I remember the girls would go over there because I had to walk by it on my way home. I lived over on Signal Street, and they would go to this place for their Girl Scout meetings. But it's now just been taken over. There was some kind of a deal where the Prairie family was given that if they would take care of it and look after it. And but it seems like something that should be a landmark at some point because it's so old and such a wonderful building, and it's just kind of sitting there deteriorating now. And this is the Oak Glen Cottages. They were started by Mr. McKee back in 1874. They were one of Ojai's first resorts. This is where people would come and stay when they visited Ojai, and then they had a stage that would take them up into Matilaha Canyon to fish and ride horses and stuff up there. Eventually, a lot of little resorts were started up in Matilaha Canyon itself, but this was quite a well-known resort, Mr. Libby, when he came to visit Ojai, he stayed here. It's just east of Gridley Road on Ojai Avenue, and the large building in the background on the lower picture is still there. It looks pretty much like that. The other cottages have disappeared over the years. Okay. This is the Masonic Lodge. It was built by a gentleman named Berkeley Brandt, who was a well-known architect back in the Midwest. And he moved out to Ojai and took over the Hermitage Ranch out in the East End and designed some buildings out there. But he designed two well-known buildings in the town. This building here, which was it's now a private home, but it was originally, and for many years, the Masonic Lodge. And he also designed the old Ojai Firehouse that's now, is it the Topa Topa Vineyards, or it's a vineyard. It's on South Montgomery Street, right next to the Art Center, on the north side of the Art Center. But it's a vineyard wine tasting place now. But was another building that Berkeley Brandt designed in Ojai. This is the Frank Ayers home, which is on Grand Avenue. It's been very well kept up. It looks pretty good even today. But it was built way back and housed various families over the years. But Frank Ayers was the one who built it.
Spooky. There's a reason for that.
And this is the Sarzotti house. Antoine Sarzotti came to Ojai, and he was not only a rancher out in the East End and had orange ranches out there, but he was a developer in the town. And I believe he developed all of the lots kind of in the area north of this up to Grand Avenue, all those properties in there, and donated the Sarzotti Park to the city of Ojai. There was one point where he threatened to take it back. I don't know. He claimed the city wasn't taking care of it to his liking, but he didn't. They built the recreation center, and it took off from there. And this house is the Willard Hall Francis house. Willard Hall Francis was a famous architect. He studied with Lloyd Wright, and he designed a lot of homes down in the Los Angeles area. It's on North Signal Street. He was also very active in the early art center. He taught art classes there, and he even made the props for the plays and stuff. So he was very active in getting the art center going. His grandmother was Theodosia Burr Shepherd. I don't know if you've ever heard of her. She was the famous horticulturalist who lived in Ventura. Willard Hall Francis was raised in Ventura, but she was very well known. People came from all over because she invented hybrid plants. She was known as the mother of hybrid plants or something like that. This is Daniel Webster House, beautiful Tudor-style house. What street is that on? Is it on Ventura Street? Daniel Webster was very instrumental in electrifying the new town of Ojai. He was an electrician who just put all the electrical infrastructure in for Ojai, and he was so successful at it and selling the new electrical appliances to the people of Ojai that it was after doing such a great job in Ojai that he went and opened a store in Ventura and started bringing more electricity to Ventura. His name was Daniel Webster.
Excuse me a second. I remember when I was on the HPC before, we were in talks about landmarking that house.
Yeah, the owner had thought about it because they liked the fact that it was historic, but I don't know whatever happened to that. This is the William Mallory home. Mallory Way was actually named after his father, George Mallory, but William Mallory was a businessman in Ojai. He was went in with Mr. Rowe, and they had the Mallory and Rowe livery and also Chevy dealership. But that's in Austin Pierpont. And finally, we have the Michael Hugh Clark home. Michael Hugh Clark immigrated from Ireland, and his goal in joining the Civil War was to learn how to fight so he could go back and free Ireland from the English. But he was captured and thrown into Andersonville. If you ever have read the book Andersonville about that famous prison colony. Anyway, he made it out to Ojai, and two of his sons, there are a lot of descendants in Ojai from Michael Hugh Clark, people with a lot of different last names, but two of the more best-known ones were Tom Clark, who ran the livery down where the pharmacy is now, and he also became supervisor on the County Board of Supervisors representing the Ojai Valley. And the brother, Bob Clark, was also well known for his horse riding and and he became a sheriff of Ventura County and eventually a marshal, a U.S. Marshal, and was very high up in the ranks of law enforcement. But I believe both of them were the ones who recommended Harry Hunt to the constable job, because he had been a undersheriff or a deputy for 8 years before he came to Ojai as the constable, and he worked with these two men. So that house is now out it's still out by Aquaflow.
Mm-hmm.
And then just to kind of recap what being on the structures of merit would do, if accepted by the council, would be to give these properties recognition for the role that they've played in the story of Ojai and their status as historic building. It could make them eligible for incentives. They would already be eligible for the historic building code, to use that, but it would be possible that they could also become eligible for some other tax breaks to help maintain their building. Also, it would mean that their building would be at least on the city radar for future landmarking or just future investigation or review if anybody came with a project. And anyway, that's the historic structures of merit.
Well, thank you, Craig. That was wonderful. Do we have any other questions for Craig? No?
No, but that was wonderful. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Hope it didn't go too long.
Worth every moment.
And
Yes, thank you.
I'm pretty sure the third time that you've made a similar presentation, and it just keeps getting better. So I've seen them all.
They're getting more historic.
They are, aren't they? They are. Okay, well, thank you very much. Okay, that concludes item number 5. Future agenda items. Says receive and file.
Our future agenda item list is rather short at the moment. We have the downtown historic district updates at every meeting, and we have historic preservation awards coming up. And we will be meeting with, well, this isn't on our future agenda items, but the HPC will be meeting in the joint meeting with the council coming up. So
June
that is at
27th,
June 27th,
5 o'clock.
5 o'clock.
I hope that's what I shared.
That's the plan.
Okay, the other thing is October 12th, 2023 will be Ojai Day. So if we can put that on the agenda. Also, please.
Also, can you request or let council know about this presentation so they are aware of it before our joint council if we're going to be discussing it with them? Craig Walker's presentation on the historic sites of merit.
I'll look into how if and how to get a presentation to them.
Just let 'em know
I'm
it
thinking-
exists.
I'm thinking that what's in your packet would certainly go to them as far as the watching a presentation. Hopefully they're watching tonight, or they can also watch it on the minutes or the video for tonight's meeting.
Right, but I would think if you just included the packet in there,
Exactly.
And-
That would go with the staff report.
yeah.
But there's so much more information that you gave, so I'd just like them to know that this presentation existed, that's all.
Then they can watch the HPC meeting, June 8th, 2023, and sit back, relax, get some popcorn, and enjoy the history of Ojai. So that's why these people get excited about Historic Preservation Commission. Thank you, Craig. That was wonderful. Okay, future agenda items, that's on there. Anything else on the calendar on that sheet that we need to remember? Again, Historic Preservation Awards. Okay, and then we have Downtown Historic District items that are scheduled to take place within the next couple of months. Okay,
Brian,
yes.
how are we going to prioritize all these items? Because we only have an hour, so
That's a question that I'm going to ask staff in just a minute, or
Okay.
see if it's a part of their planning report. Do you have any information that you can share with us regarding the Joint Council Historic Preservation Commission meeting?
I don't have any information to share with you. Staff will be writing a staff report for the HPC and the items that we've discussed to go at that meeting. And
But there's just too many. Is there a way to whittle it down before staff bothers trying to make a report on so many things? I mean, we're gonna have to whittle that list down. That's way longer than an hour.
Yes, so that has taken place, whittling that list down. It's not kind of in the planning stages and planning discussions.
Okay.
Would that be a fair assessment?
well, the joint meeting is this month.
Yes.
If the HPC is asking staff to whittle down from the list that has been shared, tonight's probably the night to do that. Except that it's not on the agenda to discuss. You're going to have an opportunity at the meeting to talk about which items are your preferences, and some of the items are automatically going to go faster than others. But I do have to repeat something that I just said, and that is that it's not on the agenda. So I can't have us discussing and whittling down.
Yes.
Why do I have memory that we did whittle it down at our last? I feel like we all need to watch that meeting again.
We did discuss some items as a part of what we wanted to do at the meeting, but, so,
But didn't we say, no, we don't want to talk about this, no, this is not ready, we want to just have it just be these couple of priorities? I just feel like we all need to watch it again,
okay.
or at least that part, because I'm pretty sure we did whittle it down.
And I think if they have input towards that after watching that, then they can send an email directly to you
Well, they can send it directly to me.
and not copy
and-
others.
Right, yeah, always just send something directly to me. And you will have an opportunity at the meeting with the city council
Mhm.
to talk about what it is that you want to talk about.
So we'll set some priorities that night.
Okay.
Okay. Planning report. Let's see, joint meeting agenda. Again, that meeting is currently scheduled for June 27th at 5 o'clock. That will be the council's second meeting of the month of June. And so we will have 1 hour, get going right at 5 o'clock so that we can finish prior to 6 o'clock and change the tables around if we need to and help get the council meeting going on time. So, yep, many things to discuss, and we'll just make sure we're focused on that. Okay, commissioner comments. I have some items listed, so anybody have, Gina, anything you want to bring up? Rick? No. Craig?
Well, the only thing I wanted to bring up was I really appreciated what you said at the school board meeting. I thought that was well done. And I appreciated their wanting more communication with the HPC so that there are no surprises, which I think is a good idea. But when we had met last time, I expressed interest in maybe that being reciprocal, and the school district would send someone to us to tell us what their plans are for buildings that they own in the city of Ojai that might be historic. I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask, to have maybe one of their bond managers say, these are the plans that we have for that campus, so that we can at least be aware of it. So I don't know if we can communicate that to them, because I think it would benefit us to be open with them and to have it be reciprocal.
And I'd like to add that it would be a benefit to them as well. I think that having them come to us and use us as a resource for any questions that they might have, or any help that we might be able to give them in finding them what they need to know about adaptive reuse and about just finding the right people to help them. It shouldn't be, it should be collaborative. And I think that is what it should.
Because
what
I
it should
found
be.
their HRR, their historic report, just by accident, looking through their packet one day. I mean, how nice it would be if I know that they're the lead agency for their own building projects with CEQA, but it would be nice just as a courtesy, since...
Okay, let me jump in since I spent time with them last night. Since we had the meeting and we had Kathy Smith, who is now on the OUSD school board, and in talking with Atticus, I saw Atticus and I actually toured the grounds this last Saturday when the grading group was here, and we were talking about that. I let him know at that time that the joint council meeting was planned to be June 27th at 5 o'clock. That was something in the correspondence that went to them, was noted with them, but the day and time hadn't been. So I communicated that with Atticus. I talked to both he and Kathy and let them know that I was planning on coming to the meeting. They do have, in the early part of their agenda, section 3.0 is correspondence with outside groups. And in that, in their package, they had, as a part of that 3.0, 3.1 was the Historic Preservation Commission, so we have our own section dedicated, was the email that was originally sent to them by Lucas. I think this might have been a follow-on to that one. So that was in there. I introduced myself to them at the meeting. Wonderful. I had... Before, when we were looking at the Nordhoff Grammar School, I had gone to every school board meeting. However, the school board that's there are completely different from the school board that was in place then. Cheryl Knox was in place at those meetings. She is now the interim superintendent. I pointed out at that meeting that Cheryl Knox has been my neighbor for 9 years. Just unique things. Kathy Smith, I've known, I worked with her mother decades ago on Little League. There is a bronze plaque at the Little League Park that my wife did the caricature for. She's now working on Harry Hunt Sr. So there are a lot of people that I knew. Phil Moncharch, who is an attorney, and I had not met. Jim Halverson I knew from following COVID all those years. I talked to Blair.
Bernie.
Okay. I talked to her the meeting before, so I think Gina was watching last night. Sounds like you were too. I thought Phil Moncharge asked the question. He asked about the upcoming council meeting, our joint council meeting. He said, is there any action that's going to take place at that meeting? I told him the only one I knew potentially, action item potentially that would take place would be the plaque that we had recommending to the city council. That all other items, including the historic sites of merit that might be discussed in that meeting, were informational only. He asked, does that mean then, and prior to me telling him about Harry Hunt, he asked, are there any action items that you'll take place in that meeting? And the only action item I knew that might take place in that meeting, again, was the Harry Hunt plaque, because it had been recommended to me by staff that that was the quickest way to get it to the council. So there were Joe Richards, who I knew. My son and his son played sports at Ventura High School. He was there. I didn't realize that until they said his name. We have a great relationship. So, but it's, and one of the things Phil Moncharge asked, are you going to keep us informed when things are going to come on the agenda? And I said that we made that commitment to Atticus and to Kathy Smith when they were at the last meeting, and that, yes, we will keep that agreement to them. And I wanted to, say that so that they know we're taking that on personally. The easy thing would be, hey, I'll help you sign up. But again, we want to keep that relationship. Atticus is very, very willing, and so is Kathy, to equally treat us respectfully as we've told them. There's been something going on in a little bit of a misunderstanding in an article that was on I spotted it this morning in the Ojai Valley News online. As soon as I saw that, which I thought was something that might cause an issue, I called Mara and I called Atticus, and I had, I think, 3 phone calls with each of them throughout the day until that was finally resolved. And so we are working closely with them. I have no doubt that they will work closely with us.
Well,
I did mention that, I mentioned that there was a report that was created in when they did the cafeteria, that was CEQA mandated by the state, and that there was fabulous information on that 118-page report about the historic nature of the property. And they should contact people that might know where that is.
Well, I'm just wondering if we can ask them, because I would be interested to know what plans they have for those properties. I don't, that's all I'm asking, is if we can request that they don't have to, but can we request that they come and fill us in on what plans they do have for schools that are within at least our boundaries or the sphere of influence, because our historic preservation code also reaches out to the sphere of influence, that they could come and just tell us what their plans are. I have no idea even how to find out. Is there somewhere?
So we expressed that both in the meeting and in follow-up with that, that they come here just like I went there. They're willing to do that.
Oh, good.
I've been following what's been going on with the school district, not involved, but following what's going on with the school district. And there were questions last night that were brought up just in it where I don't think they've really got to the point where they're ready to start talking about the buildings themselves, because they're still trying to figure out who's going to go where. There was a running joke last night that a certain group was going to end up in Ojai Valley Inn, and they were talking to the different people that were retiring, and half of them said, well, I heard we were going to be at the Ojai Valley Inn, so I set my retirement papers on the side. And then I heard we weren't. That's why I'm here tonight. I'm retiring. So there was an ongoing joke.
Well, they said something about how they were still going to go ahead, for example, and build the solar panels over the parking lot on the Arbolata side of the building. So there may be some of them that they're putting on hold now, but it would just be good for us to know what what they do have planned and what the status of those.
I think, so again, they have agreed to provide that information,
Okay.
but for us to insist or demand that they provide that information right
That
now.
wasn't what I said, that they wanted us to inform
Yes.
them of when we're talking about their property, which is fine, I agree with that. But then I'm just saying, can we request of them that they send someone to a meeting or give us a report that outlines what projects they have scheduled?
So yes, that request has been made, and when there's an indication that there's any movement towards that, and again, that will show up in the agendas. And even beforehand, when I see them ask that they do that, I'm happy to ask again, but
Okay.
again,
That'd be great.
that's what the relationship is built on. But no, I'll ask again. And anyone here is certainly welcome to talk to them. I know that Atticus, before the meeting, told me that he had already talked to Cindy Convery. I don't know what about, but he told me.
Well, I don't
They
think
had
it's my place to invite them to come to our meeting. That
Yeah.
would be your place.
Oh, yeah, no, I will, but, okay, so, let's see. Joint City Council, we heard from Mara. The jail, we had kind of left it on the naming of the jail. Harry Hunt Jr. that thought about it that night, and the morning he woke up and said, no, I don't think that's what my dad would want. And so he withdrew any consideration for the jail to be named for his father. The family is very, very happy and pleased that there will be a plaque that's there. And Mara and I went off on a field trip trying to, I was saying today when I walked in, there may still be blue tape on the wall. I'm not sure we put some painter's tape. So that has been withdrawn. Again, the family was very appreciative. Harry Hunt, his wife Vesta, and his daughter Kimberly. Harry Hunt was the Grand Marshal on the Oakview Memorial Day Parade. Vesta sat with the vehicle with him, and his daughter, who is an anchor for I think maybe ABC in San Diego, said, yeah, I'm not much on sitting in vehicles. So she got out and shot photos and video of the parade for us and then relayed them to me. I thought that was kind of cool. Let's see, the plaque, we figured out the size. They figured out the picture, the black and white picture that we saw of Harry Hunt that you see so prominent. They decided that is the picture that they'd like to use on the plaque. And so my dear sweet wife was trying to find the best picture she could and then create kind of an outline that would work for them. And then we have verbiage that we want to come up with in order to get kind of a mock-up to be able to take to the council at one point.
Chair Akins, you were going to get that language to me by the end of the week. As
Yeah.
As we
It's the only thing I have to
discussed,
do.
as we previously discussed.
Yeah. My dear sweet wife, who was not feeling well today. So, okay, so Joint City Council Plaque Commission comments, Ojai Unified School District. But Craig, I will relay that to Atticus. And he is kind of the focal point for that kind of things. Kathy has been, I spoke with Kathy on some of the things rather than going to Atticus because, I know they're busy. That's all I have. Do we have anything else? This may be the last time, at least this quarter, that we get to see Mayor Sticks. Huh? Please, thank you and John for being here tonight. And
Yeah, I don't know if this is on, but who cares? Just thank you so much. This was fantastic. I'm really blown away by all the work you do and all the expertise you have and just the institutional knowledge. So thank you. Really fascinating. Lima bean bread. Who knew? It sounds great. Let's bring it back. Gina, I love the school trip. That sounds really fascinating. And the teacher in me is thinking, oh, great place to teach about prison reform, but I don't know if you want to go there. Okay, just a thought. Maybe not. Yeah, Craig, that presentation really was so fascinating, and I will encourage, yeah, let's give you a hand, yeah. I will encourage the council members to definitely watch it, and really, I learned so much now. I can't wait to take a tour and see all that, so. Brian, thank you so much for collaborating with the school district and really working on forging a good relationship, which is really important, and so thank you for doing that, collaborating and being there and talking to everyone, and I know moving forward it'll be, much smoother, I think, because of that relationship, so thank you. I did run into the Harry Hunt family on Memorial Day down at Liberty Park, and they are just over the moon. They were just so excited about this, so it's really great. So thank you for working on that, and just thank you for all your time and effort and dedication to our community, because I get those binders too, and it's a lot of work. So really grateful for that. Maura, thank you. Amazing. Thank you for being here and keeping everything running so smoothly. And Alex and James Hahn out in the ether, thank you so much for keeping things running behind the scenes. Much appreciated. So,
And thank you, Mayor.
my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank
This
you,
is
Mayor.
really fun. And I don't know who's your next person, but I will. I'll give you a shout out on Tuesday, because this is really special. And I look forward to the 27th, so that'll be fun.
Great, thank you very much. And I've been hitting refresh, and sometime mid today, the agenda came out for the council meeting Tuesday night, and so just to make the commissioners aware that the commissions will be discussed in public hearing item number 5. So you might want to look at that, and if you have any comments, then I'm sure the mayor and the council would appreciate hearing from our commission.
That would be great. That would be much appreciated.
Yeah,
The other thing I'm the school liaison for the council, so anything I can do to help in that way.
fabulous. Okay, Craig, anything else? No. Thank you for tonight. It's like, okay, it's another Craig night. Woohoo! Seriously. I was thinking, see, Craig, just to honor our friend, I brought David Mason with me tonight. Okay, his spirit was here with us. Rick, anything else?
Nothing else.
Gina? No. Mara?
No, but thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, we're done.